She thought she got a gift, but I had the last laugh. What happens when a generous gesture turns into a nightmare? Calling all strong, independent women. If you've ever felt underestimated, taken for granted, or just plain done with someone's disrespect, then you are in the right place. Subscribe now and hit that notification bell because this story, my friends, is for every one of us who's learned that sometimes the sweetest revenge is served with a smile and a secret. You won't want to miss a single moment of this journey. It was a Tuesday afternoon, crisp and bright, the kind of New England day that usually filled my 70-year-old bones with a quiet joy. I was pulling out of my driveway, carefully, as always, in my well-maintained, if slightly older, sedan. This car, a sensible Buick LeSabre, had been my faithful companion for nearly 15 years, carrying me through countless errands, road trips with my late husband Richard, and most recently, ferrying my two adorable granddaughters to their weekly piano lessons. Today, however, its destination was not the grocery store or the grandkids' school. Today, it was headed straight into the clutches of my son's wife, Brenda. I pulled up to their perfectly manicured suburban home, a place that always felt more like a museum than a lived-in space. Brenda, with her perpetually coiffed blonde hair and designer jeans, was already waiting on the porch, a smirk playing on her lips. She'd been hinting, rather aggressively for months now, about how old my car was and how dangerous it was for someone my age. The truth was, she wanted it for herself. Not for necessity, mind you, because her least luxury SUV was due back, and she didn't want to shell out for another new one just yet. Think of it as a temporary solution, Mother Grace, she'd purred over the phone yesterday, until you decide you really don't need a car anymore. The audacity of that woman never ceased to amaze me. As I stepped out, keys in hand, Brenda's smile widened into a full-blown triumphant grin. "Well, isn't this a delightful surprise?" she exclaimed, her voice dripping with mock sweetness. "Finally decided to upgrade, have we? Or perhaps downsize your responsibilities?" Her eyes scanned my outfit, my comfortable cardigan and sensible slacks, with an almost visible sneer. I simply offered her a tight-lipped smile. "It's all yours, Brenda," I said, holding out the keys, "just as we discussed." She practically snatched them from my hand, her laughter echoing in the quiet afternoon air. It wasn't polite laughter. It was a high-pitched, almost cackle-like sound that seemed to mock every move I made. She laughed at my old car. She laughed at my perceived generosity. She laughed at me. And in that moment, as her laughter bounced off the polished chrome, I knew with absolute certainty that she had no idea what was truly nestled in the faded, unassuming envelope in her hand. My heart, usually a steady drum, beat with a new, exhilarating rhythm, a rhythm of quiet confidence and a secret yet to be unveiled. You've only scratched the surface of the story, and believe me, it's about to get a whole lot more explosive. You will not want to miss what happens when Brenda discovers the real reason for my generosity. Stay right here to witness the shocking revelations to come. The day after Brenda's triumphant laughter echoed in my driveway, a strange quiet settled over my usually bustling life. My Buick, my faithful companion, was gone, replaced by an unsettling void in the garage. It felt odd, like a limb I hadn't realized I leaned on so heavily was suddenly missing. But this wasn't about the car itself. It was about the principle of it all, the utter lack of respect. I found myself pacing my living room, the Persian rug, a wedding gift from Richard's grandmother, feeling oddly thin beneath my slippers. My mind, usually a calm sea of daily routines and pleasant memories, was now a choppy ocean, churning with indignation. I tried to distract myself. I baked Richard's favorite apple pie, the scent of cinnamon and warm fruit usually a balm to my soul. But even as the kitchen filled with that comforting aroma, my thoughts kept drifting back to Brenda's cackle. She probably thought she was so clever, so victorious. She probably bragged about her new car to her friends, painting me as the aging, forgetful mother-in-law who was finally giving in. Oh, the stories I could imagine her spinning, each one more condescending than the last. The sheer gall of it all. It was like she believed I had no thoughts, no feelings, no life beyond serving her convenience. Later that afternoon, a notification popped up on my tablet. It was a message from my Bridge Club group chat. Mary Beth, bless her nosy heart, had posted, "Anyone seen Grace's new car? Heard she finally got rid of that old relic." Below it, a string of laughing emojis and comments started to appear. Good for her, about time. She always did cling to things. Brenda was telling me how she practically had to beg Grace to let go of that ancient thing. The words, though seemingly innocuous to others, stung. Brenda hadn't wasted a second spreading her version of events across our small community's digital grapevine. It wasn't just the car. It was my image, my independence being twisted and presented as a pathetic concession. My fingers, usually so nimble on the bridge table, hovered over the keyboard. A fiery retort sprang to mind, something about Brenda's true intentions and the nature of gifts. But then I paused. What good would a public squabble do? It would only fuel Brenda's ego, make me look like the bitter old woman she probably already imagined me to be. No, that wasn't my style. My style was subtle, precise, and often delightfully delayed. The thought of their smug faces, especially Brenda's, tightening into expressions of sheer disbelief and panic, sent a tiny shiver of anticipation down my spine. Oh, how I relished the image. Let them laugh now, let them gossip. The web they were weaving around me with their whispers and assumptions was about to become their own tangled trap. This is just the beginning of Grace's quiet storm. The stage is set, the players are in place, and what happens next will leave you speechless. Don't dare miss the moment Brenda's carefully constructed narrative comes crashing down. The truth is about to unravel, and it's far more shocking than you could ever imagine. Days bled into a week, then another. Brenda, predictably, was making good use of my Buick. I'd spotted around town, parked at the country club, outside the trendy new boutique downtown, even at the very same bridge club where Mary Beth and her cronies were still buzzing about my supposed generosity. Each sighting was a subtle reminder of her perceived victory, a tiny barb that, for anyone else, might have festered into outright bitterness. But not for me. Oh no, bitterness is for those who haven't yet planned their counterstrike. My social calendar, however, seemed to have taken an unexpected hit. Invitations to neighborhood potlucks, garden parties, even casual coffee mornings started to dry up. It wasn't overt, of course. No one outright said, "We don't want you here, Grace." It was far more insidious than that. Conversations would halt when I approached. Eyes would dart away. A polite yet firm, "Oh, we thought you were busy," or "So sorry, we just decided on a whim," became the standard excuse. It was the quiet exclusion, the subtle turning of backs, orchestrated, I suspected, by Brenda's insidious whispers. She was isolating me, painting me as the frail, no longer relevant matriarch who had finally lost her grip on reality, and more importantly, her assets. One afternoon, my phone rang. It was my son, David. Usually our conversations revolved around his work, the grandkids' achievements, or superficial pleasantries. But today, his voice was different. Tense. "Mom," he started, a nervous cough escaping him, "Brenda and we're having a few people over for a casual dinner this Saturday. Just some close friends, a small gathering." He paused, and I could practically hear Brenda whispering in the background. Well, Brenda thought it might be a good idea if you didn't come this time. Just to keep things intimate. Intimate. That was a laugh. Brenda's intimate gatherings usually involved a guest list long enough to fill a small ballroom. The real meaning, of course, was, "We don't want you here, Grace, because you're a reminder of what we've taken." The gall, the absolute unmitigated gall of them using my son to deliver such a blow. My blood, usually calm as a mill pond, began to simmer. This wasn't just about a car anymore. This was about my place in my own family, my standing in my community. It was about respect, or rather the complete lack of it. They were trying to erase me, to make me disappear into the background like an old piece of furniture. Well, two could play at that game, and I, Grace Elizabeth Sterling, had always been a master of strategy. "Oh, David," I replied, my voice steady, perhaps a little too sweet. "Please tell her I understand perfectly. I wouldn't want to intrude on your intimacy." The sarcasm was probably lost on him, bless his simple heart, but it was a quiet victory for me. They had no idea the chess game they had just entered, believing it to be a mere game of checkers. They were about to learn that sometimes the quietest players hold the biggest secrets, and the most unassuming gifts can carry the heaviest price. We are on the verge of the turning point. The casual cruelty, the dismissive laughter, it all leads to this. You simply cannot afford to miss what happens when Grace's quiet dignity gives way to a revelation that will shatter Brenda's world. The truth is coming, and it's going to be earth-shattering. My phone call with David left a bitter taste, but it also solidified my resolve. Brenda thought she could orchestrate my social exile, make me an afterthought, a dusty relic to be stored away. Well, she was about to find out that this relic had a few more tricks up her sleeve. The next few days were spent in a quiet flurry of activity, though to an outsider, I was simply puttering around my home, enjoying a leisurely week. I revisited some old legal documents, made a few discreet calls, and arranged for a very particular delivery. The anticipation, the sheer deliciousness of what was to come was far more satisfying than any of Brenda's lavish, intimate dinners. Saturday arrived, crisp and clear, a perfect evening for a gathering, or perhaps for a grand unraveling. I dressed meticulously, not in anything flashy, but in a classic, elegant navy suit that always made me feel poised and formidable. A string of pearls, a gift from Richard on our 25th anniversary, completed the ensemble. I wasn't going to David and Brenda's dinner. I was going to make an appearance, a significant one. I arrived at their house precisely at 7 o'clock, just as the last rays of sunlight painted the sky in hues of orange and pink. The driveway, as expected, was packed with gleaming luxury vehicles, Brenda's usual crowd. I parked my modest, rented sedan, a sleek black model that was surprisingly inconspicuous, a few houses down. No grand entrance, not yet. My goal was surprise, not spectacle, at least not initially. I walked up to their front door, a slight smile playing on my lips. From inside, I could hear the muffled sounds of laughter, clinking glasses, and Brenda's distinctly loud voice, no doubt regaling her guests with another one of her self-aggrandizing anecdotes. I rang the doorbell, once, twice. After a moment, a young woman, one of Brenda's more timid friends, opened the door, her eyes widening slightly when she saw me. "Mrs. Sterling? Oh, I didn't realize you were coming," she stammered, clearly flustered. "Surprise," I said, my voice sweet as honey, yet with an underlying edge of steel. "David forgot to mention it, I suppose. But don't worry, I won't stay long. Just long enough to deliver something." I brushed past her gently, stepping into the grand foyer. The living room, a pristine space with gleaming hardwood floors and uncomfortable-looking modern furniture, was filled with people. Their conversations momentarily hushed as they turned to stare at me. David, looking pale and caught off guard, stood by the fireplace, a half-empty glass of what looked like expensive scotch in his hand. And there, center stage, was Brenda, her eyes narrowing into slits as she spotted me. Her laughter, moments ago so boisterous, had vanished completely. "Grace, what on earth are you doing here?" Brenda's voice was sharp, laced with undisguised venom. "David told you this was a private dinner." "Oh, I know, dear, but I simply couldn't let such a generous gift go unacknowledged." With that, a prearranged discreet knock sounded at the door. The timid friend, still near the entrance, opened it again. Standing on the porch, holding a large, official-looking document in his hand, was Mr. Henderson, a well-respected local notary public, whom I had specifically requested for this very moment. His presence, utterly out of place at a casual dinner party, drew gasps from the assembled guests. Brenda's face, moments ago furious, now blanched, a flicker of genuine fear crossing her features as she recognized him. This was the moment. The secret, so carefully guarded, was about to be unleashed. The silence in that room was deafening, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. You are on the precipice of a revelation that will send shockwaves through this family and community. You absolutely cannot miss what unfolds as Grace finally unveils her carefully laid plan and Brenda's world comes crashing down around her. Get ready, because the truth is about to hit like a freight train. The air in David and Brenda's immaculate living room crackled with an almost audible static. All eyes were on Mr. Henderson, the notary, and then on me. Brenda, usually so composed and calculating, looked like a deer caught in headlights. Her carefully constructed facade of superiority was crumbling, bit by bit. David, bless his clueless heart, still seemed utterly bewildered, his gaze flitting nervously between his wife and me as if expecting a sudden magical explanation for the bizarre turn of events. "Mr. Henderson," I began, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the stunned silence. "If you would be so kind as to read the contents of this document for everyone present?" I gestured towards the manila envelope Brenda still clutched in her hand, the very one she had so carelessly dismissed a week ago. Her grip tightened on it, a desperate, almost pathetic attempt to keep its secrets hidden. But it was too late. The cat, or rather the entire legal team, was out of the bag. Mr. Henderson, ever the professional, gently took the envelope from Brenda's trembling fingers. He cleared his throat, adjusted his spectacles, and began to read. The first few sentences were boilerplate legal jargon, but then he got to the crux of it. As of 2 weeks ago, this vehicle, a 2010 Buick LeSabre, VIN number XYZ123, is hereby transferred not to Brenda Sterling, but to the Our Town Senior Center Foundation as a charitable donation, with the express condition that the proceeds from its sale be used to fund their Meals on Wheels program. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Brenda's face went from pale to an alarming shade of crimson. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. David dropped his glass of scotch, the ice cubes scattering across the gleaming hardwood floor, clinking like tiny, tragic bells. The pristine rug, Brenda's pride and joy, was now stained. Oh, the irony. Mr. Henderson continued, his voice unwavering. "Furthermore, as a part of this charitable donation, the title has been irrevocably signed over and a lien has been placed on the vehicle's future sale proceeds to ensure said funds are directed solely to the Meals on Wheels program for a period of no less than 10 years. Any attempt to sell or transfer ownership outside of these terms will result in immediate legal action by the foundation." The silence that followed was even heavier than before, punctuated only by Brenda's ragged breathing. Her friends, who moments ago were laughing at my expense, now looked at her with a mixture of confusion, shock, and a dawning realization. The gift she had so gleefully accepted, the car she had laughed about being an old relic, was now a legally binding commitment, a car with an invisible anchor tied to a charitable cause. She couldn't sell it for profit. She couldn't even trade it in without dealing with a legal quagmire that would expose her avarice to everyone. She was stuck with a donated car that she now effectively had to use to support a charity. Brenda finally found her voice, a strangled, high-pitched shriek. You did this deliberately. You tricked me. You cunning old woman." She lunged towards me, her face contorted with rage. But David, finally snapping out of his stupor, quickly stepped in front of her, grabbing her arms. "Grace, what is the meaning of this?" David stammered, his eyes wide with a mix of betrayal and utter bewilderment. "Meaning, David?" I replied, my voice calm, almost serene, despite the chaos around me. "The meaning is simple. Your wife wanted a car, and she got one. A car that now will do some actual good in this community, unlike her, apparently." I looked pointedly at Brenda, whose face was now a mask of pure, unadulterated fury and humiliation. She thought she was laughing at my expense. She thought she was taking advantage of a sweet, naive old lady. But some of us, David, remember that actions have consequences, and sometimes those consequences come with a very unexpected, very public price tag. The guests stood frozen, watching the drama unfold, their whispers now a frantic buzz. Brenda's carefully cultivated image, her pride, her very reputation was shattering into a million pieces right before their very eyes. And it was glorious. The fallout from this explosive revelation is just beginning. Brenda's humiliation is complete, but the true impact of Grace's brilliant maneuver is still unfolding. You absolutely cannot miss the final chapter where every loose end is tied up and Brenda and David face the ultimate consequences of their disrespect. Get ready for the satisfying conclusion. The stunned silence that had fallen over David and Brenda's living room shattered into a cacophony of whispers and hushed exclamations. Brenda, her face blotchy and tear-streaked, ripped herself from David's grip and fled the room, presumably to hide in some gilded corner of her museum-like home. David, looking utterly defeated, just stood there amidst the scattered ice cubes and spilled scotch, his shoulders slumped. The party, if one could still call it that, was officially over. Guests began to awkwardly shuffle towards the door, muttering hurried goodbyes, clearly eager to escape the radioactive fallout of Brenda's public humiliation. The air, once filled with casual superiority, was now thick with schadenfreude. I remained for a few more moments, watching David. He finally met my gaze, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion, anger, and a dawning, terrible understanding. "Mom," he choked out, his voice barely a whisper. "Why? How could you?" "Why, David?" I repeated, my voice soft but firm. "Because some lessons, my dear son, are best taught with a public audience. Your wife, with her endless jabs and her insatiable greed, needed to understand that there are consequences for treating people like disposable objects. She laughed at me, David. She mocked my kindness, and she manipulated you to try and isolate me. This wasn't about a car, not really. This was about respect, something it seems you both have forgotten." I glanced around the now emptying room. "And as for how could I? Let's just say your mother isn't quite as old and naive as Brenda would like to believe." I walked over to Mr. Henderson, who was quietly packing his briefcase. "Thank you, Mr. Henderson," I said, extending my hand. "Your professionalism, as always, is impeccable." He smiled, a knowing glint in his eye. "My pleasure, Mrs. Sterling. It's always satisfying to see justice served, in whatever form it takes." As I walked out the front door, leaving David to survey the wreckage of his wife's reputation and his own complicity, a profound sense of peace settled over me. The satisfaction wasn't in Brenda's misery, not exactly. It was in the restoration of balance, the quiet assertion of my own dignity. The community, I knew, would be buzzing for weeks. The story of Brenda Sterling, the woman who laughed at a gift only to find out it was a charitable obligation, would spread like wildfire. And for once, the whispers wouldn't be about my supposed frailties, but about the sharp, unexpected wisdom of an old lady. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects were profound. Brenda, utterly humiliated, became a pariah in her own social circles. Her friends, who had been so quick to parrot her condescending remarks, now kept a wide berth, unwilling to be associated with her public downfall. David, facing the fallout of his wife's actions and his own passive acceptance, started to call me more often, his voice laced with a newfound humility. He even offered to drive me to the grocery store, a small gesture, but a start. The Meals on Wheels program, meanwhile, received an unexpected boost in funding, ensuring that many more seniors in our community would receive the nourishment and dignity they deserved. My quiet life resumed, but with a renewed sense of purpose and a quiet chuckle whenever I saw that sensible Buick LeSabre, now emblazoned with a small Our Town Senior Center Foundation sticker, being driven around town by a very unhappy Brenda. She thought she got a car. She got a permanent reminder of her folly. And I, Grace Elizabeth Sterling, got something far more valuable: my respect, my peace of mind, and the sweet, lingering taste of justice. Some secrets, it turns out, are worth far more than any car.